I'm Claire Kingston, a tech CEO, single mom, and the kind of woman who can handle any boardroom brawl. But nothing prepared me for the moment my own sister humiliated my daughter at a pastel children's party, just to get a few cheap laughs. That was the day I realized. If I don't protect Ellie now, the cycle of cruelty I grew up with will swallow her whole, and this time I'm ready to fight back. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. The balloons were blush pink and soft lavender, bobbing gently in the humid Charleston breeze. Someone had gone all out: candy floss towers, a live puppet show, a bubble machine puffing streams of iridescent mist over the lawn. You'd think it was a party for a royal baby, not my niece Savannah's 6th birthday. I adjusted the cuff of my cream silk blouse and scanned the crowd, trying to spot my daughter. Ellie wasn't with the other kids crowded around the magician. She wasn't near the cake table either. Then I saw her. Tucked behind a towering balloon arch, Ellie sat hunched at a plastic table, fingers picking at a paper plate of uneaten cake. Her head was down, long brown hair shielding her face, but I could see the puffiness around her eyes, the quiet shudder of someone trying not to cry. My stomach dropped. I crossed the grass in 5 strides. "Ellie!" She didn't look up, didn't have to. I already knew that slumped posture, shoulders drawn in like a turtle retreating into its shell. Then I heard it, a sharp cackle rising over the din of children's chatter. "Oh, come on, it's not bullying if she's that weird already." The voice sliced through the music like a blade dipped in honey, light, laughing, and unmistakably familiar. June. My sister stood in the middle of a circle of parents and kids, gesturing with exaggerated flair, a mock pout on her face. I mean, she brought a cardigan to a bounce house. Who does that? And that little lisp, so adorable when she tried to say balloonicorn, you'd think she invented her own language. The parents around her chuckled nervously. A few glanced toward me. One mom gave a tight-lipped smile and turned away, pretending to adjust her kid's hat. I felt the heat crawl up my chest, then explode behind my eyes. Without thinking, I marched straight into the circle, every inch of me humming with the precision of someone used to walking into male-dominated boardrooms and making them go silent. "June!" My voice cracked the laughter like glass. "What exactly are you doing?" June didn't flinch. She turned slowly, her lips curved into that practiced pageant smile she'd mastered in high school. "Claire," she drawled. "It was just a little joke. Lighten up." A joke. Ellie's sitting over there crying while you entertain the neighborhood with her speech impediment. June gave a shrug. "She's fine. Kids cry all the time, she just didn't fit in, that's all." And there it was, that smile, that smirk. The same one she used when she stole my diary in 8th grade and read it aloud at Thanksgiving. When she told our cousins I wore a bra because I stuffed it with tissue. The smirk that said, "What are you going to do? Tell on me? No one ever believes you anyway." But they believed me now, because I didn't wait for permission. "Ellie, we're leaving." I didn't raise my voice, didn't make a scene, but my grip on Ellie's hand was iron as I led her past the frozen faces, past the rows of cupcakes and monogrammed party favors. Her plate clattered to the grass behind us. June called after me, sing-song sweet. "Really, Claire, over a joke, you're going to ruin Savannah's party over some tears." I didn't look back. Not even when I heard a few parents murmuring behind us, not even when the bubble machine sputtered out in a hiss. My heels clicked against the stone path like a war drum. In the car, I buckled Ellie in with trembling fingers. Her cheeks were blotchy, her hands still clutching the sleeves of her favorite cardigan like armor. The engine turned over. Rain speckled the windshield. I gripped the steering wheel jaw tight. Something cracked inside me, not just anger, not just shame. A realization. This wasn't about one party. This was about a pattern, about a woman who had never been punished for her cruelty, and a little girl who would not become another silent casualty. She said Ellie didn't fit in? Fine. Then it's time the mold broke. The rain had picked up, fat drops streaking down the windshield in long, trembling lines. Charleston in spring was always unpredictable like that. Sunshine one moment, a gray curtain the next. But right now, the storm outside felt fitting. Honest, at least. Ellie hadn't said a word since we left the party. She sat with her arms folded tight across her chest, chin tucked low, watching the wipers swish back and forth as if they were whispering secrets only she could hear. I kept my eyes on the road, heart pounding slower now but no less heavy. Finally, I said softly, "Ellie, can you tell me what really happened back there?" A pause, then a sniffle. "She said I was weird," Ellie murmured, her voice barely audible over the hum of the tires. "Aunt June," she said it loud so everyone could hear. I clenched my jaw. "For what, sweetheart?" Another pause, this one longer. "For my voice," she whispered. "And my clothes," she said I looked like a librarian from 1993. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. She made them all laugh like it was a game. She pretended to be me talking. She made fun of how I said balloonicorn. I didn't speak, couldn't yet. My fingers tightened around the wheel until the leather creaked. And then, when I tried to leave, she called me a drama queen, said I was ruining Savannah's birthday because I couldn't take a joke. There it was again, that word, joke, the family's favorite weapon of choice, as sharp as a dagger and twice as easy to disguise. She said I'm too weird for parties, Ellie added, her voice cracking. I pulled the car over. The street was empty, the lamplight casting long reflections on the wet pavement. Turning toward her, I reached for her hand. "Look at me, Ellie." Her eyes, wide, glassy, the color of oversteeped tea, met mine slowly. "None of what she said is true, not one word of it, you hear me?" She gave a small nod, but I could tell she didn't believe me, not fully. Because when the attack comes from family, it feels like a mirror shattering, not a stranger's opinion, but a reflection gone wrong. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" I asked. Ellie shrugged. "I see someone who's smart. Funny, creative. Someone who makes up entire worlds in her stories and can explain black holes better than most adults. Someone with a heart that still believes people are kind, even when they don't deserve it." Ellie wiped her nose on her sleeve, then offered the tiniest of smiles. "You forgot Brave." I smiled back. "And Brave, the bravest girl I know." We sat there for a moment, the engine idling and the storm tapping against the windows like it wanted in. "I don't want to go back to school tomorrow," she said quietly. "Savannah's friends were there, they'll tell everyone." I exhaled through my nose, this part I hadn't figured out yet, but I would, for her. "We'll talk about school tonight," I said. "But for now, let's just get home, okay?" She nodded. As we pulled back onto the road, I glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She was leaning against the window now, tracing raindrops with her finger, lost in some quiet space I couldn't reach. And all I could think was, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. June hadn't just poked fun at a kid. She de-weaponized a room full of strangers against my daughter, and I'd spent too many years excusing that woman's behavior. Years of letting comments slide for the sake of family peace. Years of being told that's just how June is. Not anymore. As we turned into our neighborhood, the porch light flicked on automatically, casting a golden cone on the wet driveway. "Mom," Ellie asked suddenly, voice small. "Yeah, baby. Why does she hate me?" That question sliced me open in ways I couldn't explain. "She doesn't hate you," I said carefully. "She hates the part of herself that sees someone brave enough to be different." Ellie didn't reply, but for the first time since the party, her shoulders eased. We pulled into the garage. The storm raged on outside, but inside something colder had started to melt, something that sounded a lot like resolve. I always thought I'd be the kind of mother who could protect her daughter from the internet. I mean, I work in tech. I've built systems to filter out hate speech, flag cyberbullying, protect users from trolls. My company has contracts with schools, nonprofits, even a few government agencies. But when the hate comes from inside your own family, from a party you thought was just a blip on the radar, no algorithm can catch that. I was in my home office, still in the same rain-damp clothes from the party, scrolling mindlessly through my phone when the notification came in. Ellie was asleep upstairs. I tucked her in with a weighted blanket and a story she didn't really listen to. Her eyes were open when I left the room, but she pretended to be asleep, something I used to do after my sister's jokes, too. The notification was from Instagram. A tag, that's what started it. The caption read, "She's gonna be famous face with tears of joy Lisp Queen," and the video was Ellie, my daughter, standing in front of a crowd of kids, cheeks flushed, voice shaking, trying to speak up. I could tell it was right after June had mocked her voice. Ellie's words came out haltingly, each syllable stiff with shame. And in the background, God help me, you could hear June laughing. "Let her talk, it's educational," she said, and the crowd howled. It wasn't just the video, it was the comments underneath. "Is this real or AI? She sounds like a toddler. OMG, June is hilarious, Savage Ann Award trophy. Librarian Core sparkles grinning, some accounts had reposted it. Kids from the party. A few anonymous meme pages. It had 3,000 views. I stared at the screen, frozen. The kind of frozen that feels like heat. Then I did what I've trained people to do during social breaches. I took screenshots, every post, every username, every share. I pulled up the metadata, checked timestamps, even traced one of the shares back to a middle schooler who had tagged Ellie's school. And all the while, the video kept auto-playing. Ellie's voice, June's laugh, the chorus of kids joining in. Over, and over, and over. The walls of my office were lined with plaques. Industry awards, newspaper clippings, a framed photo of me shaking hands with a congresswoman at a cybersecurity summit. But none of that meant a damn thing. Not here, not now. I opened a Word doc and started typing names. Date. Time. Instagram handles. I didn't stop until I had a full page. Then I printed it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet. But I knew there would be consequences. June had made my daughter a joke. Not just at a party, now across a screen. I stood up and looked around the room. I hadn't noticed before how sterile it had become. My desk, once cluttered with Ellie's art projects and old coffee mugs, was clean. Too clean. Clinical. I opened the bottom drawer. Pulled out the sketch Ellie gave me last year, me and her, standing on top of a castle made of books, fighting off dragons with words. Under it was her science fair ribbon from 2nd grade. 3rd place, but you'd think she'd won the Nobel Prize the way she'd beamed. I placed them both on my desk, right in the center. This wasn't just about justice. It was about Ellie knowing she mattered, even if the whole internet said otherwise. It's funny how strategy looks nothing like rage. People think revenge is loud, slamming doors, screaming matches, threats hurled like broken glass. But real revenge, the kind that doesn't unravel your integrity, it's quiet, calculated. A chess game played in silk gloves. 3 days after the video surfaced, I sat at my kitchen island in workout clothes I hadn't actually worked out in, sipping coffee while my laptop hummed. Ellie was still asleep, thanks to a late night filled with whispered reassurances and the soft rustle of storybooks. I hadn't told her about the video. Not yet. Let her have one more day of innocence before I explain how laughter can travel further than pain, and sometimes faster. Instead, I focused on my to-do list, not my usual CEO tasks. No, this list was personal. At the top, 3 words were underlined: neutralize, anonymize, disarm. I opened a secure tab and typed the words HR compliance complaint into the internal portal for the corporation where June worked. Her job, an HR manager for a regional logistics firm, depended on her image as a professional, ethical employee. And the video? It proved the opposite. While she wasn't wearing her company badge at the party, her face, voice, and full name were identifiable in multiple reposts. Her mocking tone, the way she encouraged children to participate, the callous disregard for a minor's dignity, it all painted a clear picture. I drafted the complaint anonymously, not out of fear, but because it's more effective that way. It forces the institution to take it seriously. No personal vendetta, just facts. A concerned party reporting conduct inconsistent with their mission. I attached links to the reposted video, screenshots of her comments, and a brief summary of the psychological implications of adult bullying in social settings. Just clinical enough to avoid sounding emotional. Just emotional enough to make it impossible to ignore. By noon, the form was submitted. By 2:13 p.m., I had a read receipt. By 4:02 p.m., I got a response. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We are initiating an internal review. Due to the nature of the material, this has been escalated to our Ethics and Behavioral Compliance Division. I closed my laptop slowly, letting that sink in. The first domino had tipped. That evening, as I was folding Ellie's favorite pajamas, soft cotton with little rocket ships, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize, I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, a text. June, did you do something? I just got a warning from HR. Workplace behavior review. What the hell, Claire? I stared at the screen, my heart calm, steady. I didn't respond. Instead, I poured Ellie a mug of warm milk and set it next to her sketch pad. Want to draw tonight? I asked gently. She nodded. And just like that, my house was quiet again, peaceful. But beneath the calm, I was on the move, because the world doesn't always punish cruelty. Sometimes you have to gently nudge it along. It started in the cafeteria. Ellie had been back at school for 2 days when I got the first phone call from the assistant principal. His voice was syrupy smooth, the kind that implies concern without ever offering accountability. We just wanted to make you aware, he said, that there's been some social adjustment issues for Ellie this week. Social adjustment. The words rolled around in my head like marbles in a glass bowl. When I pressed him, what exactly does that mean? He hesitated. Well, it seems a few students have been referring to her by a nickname. Something from that unfortunate video. I didn't need him to say it. Insta Baby, he admitted finally. They've been calling her Insta Baby. The next day, Ellie came home with smudged mascara under her eyes, something she'd secretly started experimenting with last month. A small rebellion. My heart cracked as I saw the streaks. I don't want to talk about it, she said, dropping her bag on the floor like it weighed 50 pounds. But later, as I was folding laundry, she lingered in the hallway. Mom! Her voice was barely above a whisper. I turned. She was holding a piece of notebook paper crushed in one hand. She unfolded it slowly. Inside was a pencil sketch. A crude caricature of Ellie with exaggerated teeth, giant glasses, and the word weirdo corn scrawled above her in bubble letters. They left it in my locker. I knelt down, pulled her into my arms. For the first time since the party, she sobbed, shoulders shaking, face buried in my neck, breath coming in jagged bursts. Am I weird, Mom? Am I too much? No, I said fiercely. You're not too much, you're just too good for people who don't understand you. But inside, I was boiling. That night, I requested a meeting with the school's counselor. Next morning, we sat in her office. A cheerful room with inspirational posters and potted succulents that didn't quite mask the scent of institutional carpet. Ms. Hanley, the counselor, was kind, empathetic, but vague. These things tend to blow over, she said gently. Middle schoolers can be cruel, yes, but they also forget quickly. If we draw too much attention to it, it might intensify the focus on Ellie. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled tightly. So, the solution is to ignore it. She flinched just slightly. No, of course not. We'll keep an eye on things. Encourage empathy-building exercises. Maybe a peer leadership campaign next month. It was a speech I'd heard before, back when I was the sensitive one in my own school days. I knew how this went. If you're quiet, you're prey. If you speak up, you're too much. When I got home, I did what I hadn't done since college. I opened a search bar and typed in child trauma specialists near me. That's how we found Dr. Juliet Mayer. She wasn't the kind of therapist with soft tones and therapy dogs. No, Juliet was sharp-eyed and practical. A former child advocate who had once served as a legal consultant for a state education board. Trauma isn't just car accidents and hospital stays, she said during our consultation. It's also the moment a child realizes no one will stop the laughter when it's pointed at them. I booked weekly sessions, for Ellie, and one for me. Because somewhere in all this I realized this wasn't just about Ellie, it was about me too. About a childhood of being pushed aside, told to let it go. Toughen up. Don't embarrass the family. June had humiliated me often. But back then, I swallowed it whole. I wouldn't do that again, not for me, and not for Ellie. That weekend, I tried to explain it to my parents over Sunday dinner. They invited us over, same house, same roast chicken, same old portraits of June in cheerleading uniforms lined along the hallway like saints in stained glass. I waited until dessert. I wanted to talk about what happened at the party, I said calmly. And what's been happening to Ellie since? My mother sighed. Claire, darling, it was a joke. June didn't mean anything by it. She mocked my daughter, I said, still composed. In front of a room full of people. And now Ellie's being bullied at school because of it. She's being dramatic, my father added. You're being dramatic. That video wasn't even that bad. My throat tightened. You know, I said softly, June used to call me a drama queen, too. Remember when she read my diary out loud at Aunt Linda's? Or when she told everyone I wore deodorant because I had a sweating disease? My mother blinked. Oh, Claire, that was childhood. You girls were always squabbling. I stood up. No. She was always attacking, and no one ever stopped her. They didn't say anything, just stared at me, forks frozen over half-eaten cake. I placed my napkin on the table and looked them each in the eye. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking you to understand the damage she's caused. And if you can't do that, then maybe it's time I stop bringing Ellie here. A chill moved through the room like a shadow. Claire, my father said, don't be rash. I'm being clear, I replied. There's a difference. That night, Ellie found an old photo of me as a kid, age 10, party hat slightly askew, tear stains visible on my cheeks if you looked close enough. She held it up. Was this your party? I nodded. Did Aunt June say something mean then, too? Yes, I said. She always did, and no one stopped her. Ellie stared at the picture for a long time. Then she whispered, but you're stopping her now, right? I pulled her close. Yes, baby, I said. I'm stopping her now. The first thing I noticed was how small my childhood living room had become. Maybe it was the new furniture. Maybe it was the heavy silence hanging in the air. Or maybe it was just me, an adult now, no longer willing to shrink myself to fit this space. I'd brought Ellie along against my better judgment. She deserved a chance to be heard, and maybe, just maybe, my parents deserved a chance to listen. They made tea, set out shortbread cookies. Like that could sweeten what was coming. We didn't touch them. Mom, I began carefully, Ellie has something she wants to share. Ellie looked up from her lap, her fingers twisting the hem of her hoodie. Grandma, she said softly, you know that party, the one at Aunt June's? My mother gave a tight smile. Of course, sweetheart, that was such a lovely event, wasn't it? Ellie's lips parted, then closed. She looked at me. It wasn't lovely, I said, stepping in. She made Ellie cry. She mocked her voice, her clothes. She made her the punchline. My father let out a slow sigh. Claire, it was a joke. June's always been playful, you know that. That word again. Joke. I felt something dark bloom in my chest. She used a child's real vulnerabilities to get a laugh, I snapped. There's a difference between playful and predatory. Don't be so dramatic, my mother said, sipping her tea as if we were discussing the weather. She's just like you, my father added with a chuckle. You always took everything personally growing up. I blinked. Took it personally? You mean like when June put gum in my hair before picture day? Or told the neighbors I was adopted as a prank? Oh, come on, my mother said, waving her hand dismissively. You turned out just fine. That was their defense, their whole philosophy. If you survive, it wasn't abuse. If you're functional, it wasn't trauma. I looked at Ellie, so quiet now, so still, and realized something chilling. They weren't just dismissing what happened to her. They were repeating what they'd done to me. Ellie's seeing a therapist, I said. We both are. My mother paused mid-sip. For what? For the bullying, I said sharply. For the long-term effects of emotional cruelty. For the trauma of being made into a joke and then told to smile about it. You're overreacting, she said. This new generation, they're so fragile. No, I said, rising to my feet. We're just finally refusing to carry what your generation refused to acknowledge. The room was silent. Ellie stood up beside me. I turned to my parents. We're not asking for much, just an acknowledgement. A single sentence that says what June did was wrong. My mother frowned. That would be unfair to your sister. And that was it. The moment I knew they were never going to choose what was right. They were going to choose what was comfortable, even if it meant watching history repeat itself in a smaller body. I took Ellie's hand. Come on, sweetheart, we're going. But the cookies, my father began. Let June have them, I said, not turning back. They're probably her favorite flavor, bitterness and denial. We walked out into the evening light, Charleston glowing gold against the river. Ellie looked up at me. They didn't even say sorry. I know, I said, but that's okay. Why? Because I'm not waiting for their apology to do what's right for you. Her hand tightened around mine. I didn't feel small anymore. It was almost midnight when I found the photo. I couldn't sleep, my mind spinning in slow, bitter loops. So I wandered into my office, not to work, just to be surrounded by something that felt like mine. Familiar. Safe. I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, the one I rarely touched. Inside was a shoebox. Faded, fraying at the corners, sealed with an old blue ribbon. I knew what was in there. Childhood photos, school papers, drawings with crayon hearts and awkward handwriting. I hadn't opened it in years. But that night, something pulled me to it. Maybe the ache in Ellie's eyes. Maybe the silence in my parents' living room. Maybe something older, deeper. I pulled the ribbon loose and lifted the lid. And there it was, a photo from my 10th birthday. I was standing by the cake, smiling the way kids do when they've been told to say cheese, but don't quite mean it. My party hat was crooked, my dress a little wrinkled, and if you looked closely, really looked, you could see the tear tracks down my cheeks. In the background, June, holding a gift she hadn't even wrapped, smirking at the camera, I remembered that day. She'd made fun of my handmade invitations, told the guests I'd begged people to come so I wouldn't be alone. And when I cried in the bathroom, she stood outside the door and mimicked my sobs. Everyone laughed, including our cousins, including my own mother. They said I was too sensitive. That phrase, too sensitive, followed me for years like a ghost. Every time I spoke up. Every time I got hurt. Every time I dared to say this doesn't feel okay. And now, Ellie was next in line. I set the photo on my desk beside her science fair ribbon. I stared at it for a long time, my throat tight. Then I whispered the words I hadn't even realized I needed to say. Not again, not with Ellie. I wasn't just fighting a sister. I was fighting a legacy, a system of silence, a pattern of pretty family dinners where the cruelty was passed around like a side dish. I pulled out my journal, not the digital one, the real one. Black leather cover, smooth pages, I wrote, "I will not raise my daughter in a world where she must shrink to be accepted. I will not stay silent to keep the peace while she's bleeding on the inside. I will not let the past pretend it never happened just because no one said it out loud." I closed the journal, stood up, walked to the window. The river shimmered below, reflecting the moon in broken, beautiful pieces. And I made myself a quiet promise right there in the dark. This ends with me. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of day where everything feels like it might just be okay again. The sun was out. Ellie had eaten breakfast, actual food, not just dry cereal, and she'd even hummed a little as she packed her backpack. We were 10 minutes early getting to school, and she smiled at me before walking through the front doors. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. I remember thinking maybe we're turning a corner. By lunchtime, that corner had shattered. My phone rang while I was in a client strategy meeting. I saw the school's number flash across the screen and answered immediately, heart in my throat. "Mrs. Kingston," the school secretary said, voice tight. "You need to come now." They didn't explain. They didn't have to. When I arrived, Ellie was sitting outside the nurse's office, knees pulled to her chest, eyes swollen and blank. The school nurse was crouched beside her, murmuring something soft, but Ellie wasn't responding. Her hands were trembling. She flinched when I touched her shoulder. "What happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. The principal approached from down the hall, expression grave. "We had an incident over the intercom," he said, gently steering me into a nearby conference room. "Someone accessed the PA system before lunch. They played the video." I stared at him. "You mean the video?" He nodded. "The same one from the party, the one where she's—" "I know what's in it," I snapped. "We believe a student pulled the file from social media and used a Bluetooth connection through a compromised staff login. It was deliberate, timed perfectly to when the cafeteria was full." The walls felt like they were closing in. "How long did it play?" "Just under 30 seconds before we cut the feed." 30 seconds. Of Ellie's trembling voice, her lisp. June's laughter echoing through a school filled with hundreds of kids. A public execution disguised as a prank. "Where is she?" I asked, already moving back toward the nurse's office. When Ellie saw me, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just buried her face into my chest and gripped my sleeve like it was the only thing anchoring her to the floor. I took her home. We skipped the counselor meeting. Skipped dinner. I let her change into her favorite pajamas and curl up on the couch with our dog, Bean, nestled at her feet. She didn't say a word all night, but I did. To the school board, to the district superintendent, to my legal team, and then quietly to Dr. Juliet Mayer. During our emergency session the next day, Juliet didn't sugarcoat it. "She's exhibiting classic signs of acute social anxiety," she said, her tone measured but urgent. "The incident triggered a trauma response." She's emotionally shutting down to protect herself. I nodded, though it felt more like drowning. I should have done more, I whispered. I should have pulled her out sooner. Juliet met my eyes. You've done more than most would, but now you need to do what's next. What's next? She paused. Change her environment. You can't rebuild her confidence in the same space where it was destroyed. The words hit me like a cold wind. I knew she was right. Ellie couldn't heal here, not while the halls echoed with that sound. Not while whispers chased her like shadows. I stayed up all night researching schools, progressive programs, private campuses, places with restorative justice circles instead of detention slips. I found one in Asheville, 3 hours away. Small classes, emphasis on creativity, emotional intelligence, and kindness as a practice, not a slogan. It wasn't cheap, but I had the means. And honestly, what was I even building this career for if not to give my daughter a way out? The next morning, I sat Ellie down at the kitchen table. She looked pale, hollow, like someone who'd run too far and was still being chased. Hey, baby, I said, placing a hand on hers. I want to talk to you about something good, I think. She looked at me just barely. There's a school, a different one, not here, in a place with mountains and rivers and art studios in every classroom, where they teach poetry and robotics in the same breath, and where nobody thinks mocking someone is funny. Ellie's eyes flickered. You mean move? Yeah, I said, I mean move. She didn't answer right away, but then in the quietest voice she asked, will anyone there know who I am? I shook my head. No, you get to decide who you are there. A pause. Can we take Bean? I laughed. We have to take Bean. She smiled, a real one, small, but it reached her eyes this time, and that's when I knew we were done here, done with Charleston, done with apologies that never came, done with shrinking ourselves to fit a family that only valued its reflection. We crossed into Asheville just as the sun was tipping behind the mountains, painting the sky in streaks of gold and lavender. Ellie was asleep in the passenger seat, her sketchbook open on her lap, pencil still tucked between her fingers. She'd drawn half a robot riding a unicycle through space. Even in sleep, her brow furrowed, a leftover tension she hadn't yet unlearned. I wanted to believe that this move would wash everything clean. That Asheville, with its quiet streets, the scent of pine sap and soft-spoken people, could offer a kind of sanctuary, not just for her but for me too. But peace, it turns out, isn't a place. It's a decision you make again and again. The new house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a galley kitchen with counters that tilted slightly to the left if you looked too closely. But the windows opened to a view of the river and the floors creaked like an old song. It felt honest. On our first morning, I found Ellie sitting on the back porch with Bean curled beside her. I like the sound here, she said without looking up. The river, she shook her head. No, the silence, it's not scary here, just quiet. I knew what she meant. Back in Charleston, the silence was full of things unsaid, tension that clung to the walls. Here it was different, a silence you could breathe in. We registered Ellie at her new school that week, a progressive academy tucked behind an art co-op and a yoga barn with a welcome sign painted by the students. Her advisor, Ms. Porter, had purple glasses and misbuttoned sleeves. She knelt down to Ellie's level and said, "What's something about you the world hasn't noticed yet, but should?" Ellie blinked, startled. Then, "I like learning how things fail." Ms. Porter smiled like she'd just been handed a treasure. "Excellent. You're going to love our robotics team." That night, Ellie placed her science fair ribbon and her favorite robot sketch on the shelf beside her bed. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. It was a signal, a silent yes. Over the next few weeks, she began to unfurl carefully like a flower testing spring. She joined the robotics team, signed up for a presentation project on ethical AI, got invited to a sleepover by a girl named Ava, who wore galaxy leggings and had an allergy to drama. She even started humming again, softly under her breath, the way she used to when she was building Lego towers in footed pajamas. And I started learning what it meant to be still. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I took morning walks by the river, let Bean sniff every leaf to her heart's content. I drank coffee hot for once, instead of abandoned mid-email. I even met a small circle of women through a local hiking group, Mothers, artists, one ER nurse who used laughter like armor. We didn't talk about resume building. We talked about healing. We talked about the guilt that comes with finally putting yourself first. One of them, a painter named Sarah, said, "You don't have to earn your right to peace. You're allowed to want softness without apology." That sentence stuck to my ribs. And it was around then, just as we'd started feeling safe again, that Ellie brought home the flyer. It was for a youth storytelling showcase. "Voices of the Future," it said in bold letters with a tagline, "Truth-telling is a superpower." "I think I want to apply," Ellie said, eyes cautious. "About?" I asked gently. She shrugged. "Not the whole thing, just the part where I stopped hiding." We worked on it together. Well, she wrote, and I read quietly in the background. She'd come to the living room sometimes, ask me how to spell words like resilience and unfairness and choice. She practiced in the mirror, in the yard, once even in the bathtub, reciting her speech to a loofah. Then one evening she came to my room with the final draft in her hand. "Want to hear it?" she asked. I nodded, heart pounding. She stood tall and began. "Hi, my name is Ellie Kingston, and I used to think being quiet made me invisible. But I learned that being quiet just makes it easier for other people to speak over you. I was laughed at for how I spoke. I was called names, I was made into a joke, and for a while I believed them. But then my mom told me something important. She said, 'Your voice doesn't break when you use it. It breaks when you swallow it,' so I stopped swallowing it. This is me using it now." When she finished, I couldn't say anything. I just pulled her into my arms. Because what do you say to a child who just healed a piece of your own childhood too? That night, after she went to bed, I stood at the back door watching the stars, holding the last line in my chest like a sacred thing. This is me, using it now. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like resurrection. News has a strange way of finding you just when you finally stopped looking back. It was a foggy Wednesday morning. Ellie had already left for school, her backpack bouncing behind her as she waved goodbye from the gate. I was pouring a second cup of coffee, hazelnut, my new favorite, when my phone buzzed with a headline notification. "Regional HR Manager at Branford Logistics under investigation after internal chat leak." I blinked. The name underneath was unmistakable. June Lawrence. I clicked the article, heart hammering like it used to in courtroom depositions. The browser loaded slowly, almost theatrically, and then there it was. Leaked internal chat logs obtained by the Post revealed disparaging remarks made by senior HR manager June Lawrence about employees, workplace trainings, and oversensitive modern parents. The remarks include derogatory jokes about neurodivergent children and references to putting whiners in their place, which sources allege contributed to a toxic work environment. I sat down hard on the kitchen stool. I hadn't expected it to come to this, not so soon, not so loud, but somewhere in my spine I felt it, that bone-deep rightness. It wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't about Ellie even. It was about truth finally getting tired of being patient. What the article didn't mention, but I knew, was how the journalist got the tip. A quiet email, a carefully worded lead, a breadcrumb trail I left when the video went viral and June doubled down instead of apologizing. I'd filed the initial workplace complaint anonymously, but this was the second layer, the one that traced her digital fingerprints, the group chats, the side comments, the inappropriate nicknames she used for employees' kids. You'd be shocked how many people are reckless in their company's Slack. Branford had launched an internal investigation. Her profile was taken down. The article noted pending consequences. But in the background, off the record, I already knew. A former colleague of mine from the tech compliance sector had messaged me privately. "Your sister just got put on indefinite leave. Full freeze, it's not looking good." I didn't celebrate. Not in the way people think. I didn't pop champagne. I didn't dance around the kitchen or call Ellie with the news. I just sat there, still, breathing in the echo of years where no one believed me. When I did finally tell Ellie carefully, simply, she looked at me and asked one question. "Does that mean she can't hurt other kids now?" I nodded. She went back to her homework. That weekend, my parents invited us to a family dinner back in Charleston. I almost didn't go, but something told me it was time, not for closure, for clarity. The house was the same. The couch we weren't allowed to jump on, the dusty crystal on the dining table, the faint scent of pot roast and stale tradition. June wasn't there. She'd moved back in temporarily, my mother admitted, until things blew over. My father didn't meet my eyes. The conversation at dinner was stilted, tense. Finally, my mother cleared her throat. "We saw the article about your sister." I nodded. "I assumed you would." "She's upset," she added. "Feels betrayed." "I'm sure she does." A pause. "Claire," my father began, "this didn't need to go public." And there it was, the old tune. "Didn't need to," I repeated slowly. "Or didn't deserve to." "She lost her job," my mother said. "Her reputation." She mocked a child into the viral spotlight and joked about disabled kids in her work chat. "She was venting," my father offered weakly. I stood up. "I didn't come here to argue. I came so you could look me in the face when I tell you this. I will not be funding your medical expenses anymore. Not a single copay. Not a pharmacy bill. Not after the way you chose silence over your granddaughter's dignity." My mother's jaw dropped. "You wouldn't, Claire, I already have," I said. "And if June wants sympathy, she can go look for it at the bottom of the comments section on that article." I reached into my purse and placed a printed photo on the table. Ellie, at her new school, holding a robotics trophy, cheeks flushed, smile wide, surrounded by kids who clapped when she spoke. "She's safe now," I said, voice steady. "And you didn't do that. I did, alone." They didn't say a word, not one. That silence, that final, crumbling silence, was all the confirmation I ever needed. Back in Asheville that night, Ellie asked how the dinner went. I smiled, pulling her close. "It's done," I said, not with fire, not with fury, but with finality. June called 3 times in one day. The first voicemail was just breathing and a shaky, "Please, Claire, please call me back." The second was sharper, desperation bleeding into blame. "I don't know what you told them, but you've destroyed me. I have nothing now. Are you happy?" The third one came after midnight. Her voice was smaller this time, cracked around the edges. "You won, I'm done. I just don't know what to do anymore. You always had the power, didn't you?" I listened to each message once, then deleted them. I didn't need her apologies. I didn't even need her pain. What I needed was space, real space, between my daughter and the woman who had nearly broken her for the sake of a cheap laugh. Still, the final message stayed with me longer than I wanted to admit, because for a split second I remembered us as girls, sitting under the big oak tree in our backyard, sharing secrets and popsicles. June used to braid my hair, tugging a little too tight, and whisper, "Don't tell Mom, but I like when we're just us." But that girl disappeared a long time ago. The woman she became weaponized closeness, used family like a shield, thought forgiveness was owed, no matter the wound. So I didn't call back. Instead, I texted her, just 10 words. "Ellie cried for 6 months, you'll survive." Then I blocked her number, every account, every avenue. I knew what would happen next. My parents would rage. They'd accuse me of being cruel, of abandoning them in their time of need. But they'd also come to realize something far more terrifying. The financial leash they'd taken for granted had been severed. See, after my company's acquisition, I had offered to pay their medical premiums. A quiet gesture, a way to keep the peace I no longer needed. But now, that kindness came with a boundary. No more support for those who protected June's cruelty under the guise of family loyalty. They could figure it out, together, back under one roof. I imagined June sitting at their kitchen table, the same one where she once humiliated me for crying too much as a teenager. I pictured her filling out job applications while our parents argued over whose fault this all was. There was poetry in that. Not revenge, not justice, just consequence. Meanwhile, in Asheville, life softened. Ellie had started smiling in public again. She hosted a sleepover, just 3 girls, Ava included, and I overheard them giggling at a homemade board game they'd created where the villain was named Maxilla. Her therapist noted clear progress. The anxiety spikes were fewer now. The tension in her shoulders no longer lived there every hour of the day. One morning, she burst into my room holding a flyer. "Guess who got picked to present at the leadership conference?" I blinked, groggy. "You," she grinned. "Me, they said my story was powerful and resilient." That word again. It followed her now, not like a burden, but a banner. I watched her prepare, practicing her speech in the mirror. rewriting lines until they carried just the right blend of strength and vulnerability. She didn't hide the hard parts. She just didn't live in them anymore. And neither did I. I started doing sunrise hikes, volunteering with a mentorship program for girls in tech. I built my days around joy instead of damage control. I was no longer a crisis manager in my own home. I was just Claire, mother, builder, watcher of the brave. One afternoon, while Ellie worked on her presentation, I found an old email thread from the year my company launched. In it, I had written, "I want to build something that outlasts harm. That turns every no I ever heard into a not yet." I realized I had done that, not just in business, but in life. I had broken the pattern, protected the next generation, proved once and for all that silence isn't strength. And now it was my turn to be quiet, not from fear, but from peace. The auditorium was buzzing when we walked in. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows, string lights draped across the ceiling like stars brought indoors. A table of lemonade and cookies stood in the back, untouched. Everyone's attention was on the small wooden stage set beneath a banner that read, "Voices That Carry, Youth Leadership Conference 2025. Ellie stood beside me, clutching her note cards, her fingers tapping a quiet rhythm against her jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a braid. She'd done it herself. There was a tiny robot pin on her lapel, something Ava had given her for good luck. "You okay?" I whispered. She nodded, eyes scanning the crowd. "I'm nervous," she said, "but the good kind." It hit me then how far she'd come. There were no trembling hands, no flinching at loud noises, no shrinking into corners. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. Her name was announced over the microphone, and she took the stage like someone who belonged there, like someone who knew her words mattered. Spotlight hit her face, and for a second I held my breath. But then she smiled. "Hi," she began. "My name is Ellie Kingston. I'm 13 years old, and for a while I thought I didn't matter." You could feel the silence tighten around the room, not uncomfortable, just focused. Respectful, she continued. "Last year, someone I trusted made fun of me at a party. Adults laughed. Kids recorded it. It ended up online. For weeks, strangers laughed at the way I spoke. My voice, my clothes. And I almost started believing them. But then something happened. My mom didn't just tell me I was enough. She showed me. She moved us. Changed everything. She believed in me so loudly that I didn't have to whisper anymore. And now, I know that I'm not broken. I'm just building. So this is what I want to say to anyone who's ever felt small or strange or like they didn't belong in a room. You belong. You deserve to take up space. And your voice, your weird, wonderful, imperfect voice, is not too much. It's exactly right." The crowd erupted. Not in polite claps, in real applause, the kind that comes from your chest. A standing ovation, people rising one by one until the whole room was on its feet. I didn't even realize I was crying until the woman next to me offered a tissue. "Is that your daughter?" she asked. I nodded, too full to speak. "She's incredible," the woman said. "She's going to change things." And all I could think was, she already has. Afterward, Ellie was swarmed by students and teachers and even a few local reporters. One asked if they could quote her in a district-wide pamphlet on anti-bullying initiatives. Ellie looked at me, unsure. I smiled. "If you want to share it, do it. You own your story now." She nodded slowly, then turned to the reporter and said, "Yes, just make sure you include the part about how being loud isn't rude. It's necessary." That night back at home, we sat on the porch watching the river shimmer beneath the moonlight. Bean lay curled at our feet, snoring softly. "Did I do okay?" Ellie asked. "You were extraordinary," I said. She leaned against me. "I think this is what healing feels like," she murmured. "Why that?" "Because I don't want to disappear anymore." I wrapped my arm around her and kissed the top of her head. "Neither do I inside." Our house was filled with light. Not from fixtures or candles, but from the absence of fear. There was no one waiting to mock her, no one to demand silence, no one to convince her that dignity had to be earned. She was free. And so was I. 2 years had passed, not all at once, but in the slow, deliberate rhythm of healing. Seasons changed. Report cards came and went. The scars softened. Some stayed, as scars do, but they no longer burned. And on a crisp September morning, Ellie stood at the podium of the North Carolina Youth Leadership Conference, her voice steady, her words echoing through a theater that held more than 1,000 people. She was taller now, more confident. Her hair was still braided, but she wore it looser, with strands free around her face. Her glasses had tiny constellations etched in the corners, her own design, a gift from the school's new 3D printing club she co-founded. Adjusted the microphone and smiled at the crowd. 2 years ago, she began, I stood on a much smaller stage and told a story that wasn't easy to tell. A pause. I talked about being bullied, humiliated, mocked for the way I spoke, for what I wore, for how my voice sounded when I got nervous. She took a breath. That video is still out there, by the way. Someone showed it to me recently and asked if it bothered me to know it exists, and for a second I almost said yes. She looked down, then up. But it doesn't, not anymore, because what I saw this time wasn't shame. I saw courage, a little girl trying to stand up for herself while everyone else laughed. I saw someone who deserved better, someone I'm really proud of now. I sat in the second row, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. She continued. But today I'm not here to talk about pain. I'm here to talk about what comes after. And just like that, the room shifted. People leaned forward. She had them. I found my people, the kind who listen, who build you up instead of tearing you down. I built things, robots, programs, clubs, but I also built boundaries and self-respect, and a voice that doesn't ask permission anymore. A few parents near me nodded. One wiped her eyes. And I learned something from my mom, Ellie said, smiling slightly. Something that changed the way I see the world. She paused, scanning the crowd like she wanted every eye to meet hers. She told me, the people who protect your silence aren't your family, those who defend your voice are. The quote landed like thunder wrapped in gold. And that was the moment I cried. Not the silent, polite tears I'd gotten used to in public, real ones, because I knew that line. I'd said it one night, almost in passing, after Ellie asked why some people never stood up for us. I didn't know she remembered, but of course she did. She wrapped up her speech with quiet power. So if you're here today and you've ever felt invisible, I see you. If someone told you to get over it instead of standing beside you, I believe you. And if you've ever felt like your story was too messy, too embarrassing, too painful to be heard, remember this. Telling the truth isn't weakness, it's leadership. And you are not alone. The room exploded in applause. A full standing ovation. The kind that didn't wait until the last word. I watched as Ellie stepped down from the podium, hugged Ms. Porter, and waved to the crowd like she was waving to her past self and saying, "Look, we made it." Later at the reception, people swarmed around her. Other teens, educators, local leaders. Some just wanted a handshake. Others wanted to thank her for saying what they couldn't. A girl with bright blue hair came up and said, "You made me feel like my stutter doesn't make me less." Ellie just smiled and said, "It doesn't, it makes you more." And I knew right then this was the legacy, not what we'd been through, but what we built from it. That night after the conference, we drove home under a sky dusted with stars, the windows down, the cool mountain air whipping Ellie's hair across her face. "Do you think June ever saw the article?" she asked suddenly, her voice casual. "I'm sure she did," I replied. Silence stretched for a moment. "I don't hate her," Ellie said. "I know, but I don't want to see her again." "You don't have to," she nodded. That was all. We didn't need revenge. We didn't need apologies wrapped in excuses. What we needed, what we finally had, was distance, clarity, and dignity. The road curved ahead, smooth and wide. The mountains rose in the distance like quiet guardians. And for the first time in a long, long time, we weren't running from anything. We were just driving toward what we'd earned. Peace. Has someone in your life helped you find your voice? Or maybe are you the one who helped someone else find theirs? Tell me below. I'd love to hear the stories that never made it onto stages, but mattered just as much. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If Ellie's story moved you, share it. Let her voice carry just a little further, because we all know someone who needs to hear it.